Good evening and welcome to the regular session of Findlay City Council on August 2nd, 2022. We will start this evening's meeting with roll call, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Mr. Bowman?
Present.
Ms. Frishy?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer? Here. Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
Mr. Wobser?
Present.
I'd like to welcome Holly Frishy to her first council meeting in a while. Welcome, Holly, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will accept a motion to accept the previous minutes. Mr. Slough,
I would make a motion to accept the minutes of the last session of council.
is that the public hearing or the regular session?
Regular session, sir.
Okay, second. Mr. Hellman, any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the July 19th, 2022 regular session minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? They are accepted. I need a motion for the public hearing. Mr. Slough.
I would move to accept the minutes of the last public hearings of July 19th, 2022.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the July 19th, 2022 public hearing minutes to approve the revenue estimates for fiscal year 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? They are accepted. Mr. Russell, do we have any add-ons, replacements, or removal from tonight's agenda?
We have a letter from City Clerk Launder concerning the Mardic investment annexation. Move that letter be added to the petition section of the agenda.
We have a motion. Second,
second
Ms. Frishy. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of adding it to tonight's agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? It is added. We have no proclamations. We do not have a recognition or retirement resolutions. We do have one letter concerning a petition.
Status of the Mardic Investments Annexation, partial number 02-000-102-5344, which is south of County Road 99. And it will be in the city clerk's office for a 60-day period, hold until September 29th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. We have we have one oral communication this evening from Daniel Perry from Tiffin, Ohio. He'd like to address council about bringing a pedal party bike to Findlay. Mr. Perry, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Hi, my name is Dan Perry, owner of Tiffin Pedal, Upper Pedal, and soon to be BG Pedal. The first thing I've done every single time we've started a party bike in any of these towns is met with the city council. I think you guys know your town more than anybody else, and you represent, obviously, each of your wards. I also serve on Tiffin City Council. Been a rough couple weeks, but getting better now that we have a full council. With that, I also, some of the other things I do in Tiffin, we're about to open up Big Mike's, and also run a rental business with my brothers. We have about 40 properties, with our first one being on North Main Street here in Findlay. So that kind of started the whole thing. The thing I wanted to come here today, the number one question I always got from people was, when you going to Findlay? Because this was kind of the next natural. I mean, you guys obviously have a very, robust town, and just with everything that's been going on here in the last few years, with Findlay Brewing Company now and everything like that. Those are kind of like a lot of the stops that people want to make when they're on the bike. So I would think the first thing we pride ourselves in Tiffin. If anybody follows the Tiffin Pedal Company, is we're very active in the community. We give a Person of the Year award out, that we have people nominate certain people that give back, and then we recognize those people by giving them a free ride. Some of those same things we want to carry on into these other communities as well. We feel like we want to work with the community, not work against, hence the reason I'm here tonight. I want to start off by saying there's no action needed by council for us to open up a business. There's already state law that allows commercial quadricycles, which is what we are by definition, to have alcohol on the bike. You're limited on that. You're allowed to have 36 ounces of beer per person at one time, or you can have 18 ounces of wine per person. There are things that we have learned in Tiffin that we have, put into procedure that, honestly, we have had 0 incidents in 3.5 years in Tiffin. We have had no incidences in Upper. And really, it's just, if we've had anything, it's been kind of noisy going by my house. We end at 10 o'clock. That's just a rule that we've made in Tiffin, because I don't want to, like I said, I want to be a good community partner. And I am open to taking questions from anybody about the adventure that we'd like to take on. Yes, sir.
Mr. Slout.
Oh, sorry.
I guess this is directed to Mr. Rasmussen. Don, would they only be permitted to be in the section that sells alcohol as opposed to the whole city?
Are you talking about the Dora?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Dora.
I'd have to look at it. I've not been confronted with that question. I don't know.
If I could, in Tiffin and Upper, we're allowed to.
Excuse me, make sure your mic's on.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and then, speak into the.
Okay. In Tiffin and Upper Sandusky, we're allowed to be anywhere within the city limits. Now, we did sit down with the police chief at the time. Like I said, I wanted to make sure that we were working together and there's no issues. And so we decided we'd stay off roads that were 35 miles per hour. We have a Westgate kind of like out at the mall where you guys have, and we don't go out to Westgate at all because it's just too busy. I don't want that liability for my business. So a lot of it's just common sense stuff. If you have a mile long of traffic behind you, then the driver should probably turn or get over so they go around. That's what we do in Tiffin. Every single time there's an empty space, we pull over, let the 3-4 cars pass to allow traffic to, get back up, and then we get back out in the road. We try to stay on 25-mile per roads as much as possible.
Mr. Hellman.
Yeah. Are there, Dan, are there months of operation, or do you operate 12 months a year?
We just operate during months that people want to be outside. I don't want we spend way too much money on the bikes for them to be out in the elements. So I want to protect them. Also, a chance to give people, my drivers and myself a break in the winter. And I just don't see it, people really utilizing it that much. One thing we do do as well in Tiffin is, we'll get Santa Claus on the bike and we will go visit some kids. So there might be some things like that we'll have it out in December, but pretty much December through March, we're shut down.
Mr. Wobser.
Thank you.
So you're saying that you don't need our permission to be able to bring this to our city?
Correct. Through Ohio law, it's already permitted. It's more, like I said, I would want more the blessing and to work with you guys than to, that way if you have citizens that are contacting yourself, you can bring the questions directly to myself or one of my partners and we can, address your concerns.
And you've never had a safety issue?
Never have had a safety issue.
Interesting.
Any other questions? Mr. Niemeyer.
So, I've seen a couple articles about this. I think one was in our local newspaper about Tiffin when he first started and stuff like that. And I just thought, wow, we must have a keg of beer on the place or but people supply their own alcohol.
Correct. So by law, we're not allowed to legally supply. They're only allowed to bring it on, which, again, we usually check coolers and stuff just to make sure that we're all good. There's no liquor permitted on, nor would I want it on the bike. It's all about being responsible. All my drivers are very well trained, because you got to take it very seriously when you got people's lives in your hand. And yes, we want to have a good time, but it's also doing it safely is very important.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Well, then, I assume you'd have to stay in the Dora area. Downtown outdoor refreshment, open container.
That's not, you're allowed to go anywhere within the city limits. While we were in Tiffin, actually, Dora got voted down the year that we started. People got those two things confused because they're like, how is the party bike allowed to have alcohol on the bike when Dora got voted down? But the two are completely separate laws.
Ms. Frishy?
Just two questions. I think it's a really cool thing. But would they be able to utilize the bike path to get them in further? You can't hear me? Usually everybody can hear me. So would they be able to utilize the bike path to have a little bit better route would be one question? Or are you considered motorized,
It's,
like a golf cart?
it's not really in the golf cart range. I mean, it propels when people, it's a quadricycle by legal definition. There isn't a motor on it. It's called an assisted, electronic assisted motor, where if our driver needs to go pick up a group from, some event or some restaurant or whatever, they're able to do that. Or, I mean, we've had a group from the senior citizen home that was on it, and they were a blast. But obviously, the motor helped them out a lot. So at the end of the day, my son, we had his little baseball team on it, and it's just, I mean, it's not just for people that want to get rowdy or whatnot. But we've had birthday parties. We do history tours. We try to do a little bit of everything. Like I said, we want to be more than just bar on wheels,
Yeah.
I guess.
I think if we could use the bike, or you could, I think that'd be great for you, just to not impede traffic and stuff. And then the other thing, how many are you going to have in Findlay?
The goal would just be one to start. I have one in all the other towns currently. Another question I always get is, are you ever going to get a second one in Tiffin? Maybe. I mean, right now, I think it's just a cool thing to kind of, take to other communities and try and, help the downtown. One of the things I was talking about with, I called a local business person in Findlay today about possibly partnering on this. And, people will, before the ride, will come and eat downtown, and then typically they'll stay and, go to the other bars after the ride's done. We only do 2-hour time slots. I find that's the sweet spot. 3 hours was just, in my mind, was too long. So I didn't want like I said, the liability of it. It's one of those things that we learned. When I started, it was a 2 or 3 hour, you got to pick it. It was me just trying to learn the business. But since then, I've told my brothers we are not doing any more 3 hours, because it just, a third hour is nothing but headaches normally, so.
Mr. Baumann?
So just for clarification, someone paid by your company is driving the vehicle, not people who are consuming the alcohol?
Correct. I probably should have clarified that.
Okay.
Yeah, we, as a business, will supply the driver, and it will never be driven or operated by one of the passengers. Obviously, our driver will be sober the whole time, and, like I said, their main responsibility is safety.
There's no additional questions. We thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck with your new adventure.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
That concludes oral communications. We have no written communications, reports of officers and departments.
Letter from Director of Law Rasmussen regarding additional funds for the 2022 Legal Financial Services Object Code 4414000 for City Law Director's Office.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Treasurer's Reconciliation Report for June 30th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding additional funds for 2022 Cube and Diamonds concession sales.
Questions or comments? Mr. Russell?
Rob, is the Zagnut inventory getting low? Do you need this tonight?
No, I think this can pass, go for at least another council meeting, so thank you.
Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, I've got another question here, Rob. When, I'm looking for the numbers. What was it? The original appropriation was 66,000.
Correct,
You made a revenue off of that of 1,100 or 111,000.
correct.
Do they not take the revenue then and go out and buy more popcorn?
Nope, as I was educated on this a while ago by our auditor, that this is a governmental accounting practice. It goes into the general fund, and then we have to pull from the general fund. It's not that isolated budget of a bucket.
Is
Mr.
it-
Wobser?
Is that the same issue we had with the jet fuel at the airport?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Any other
Buy that.
questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding Hancock Public Health Combined Services contract renewal.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser?
Rob, on this, there's several questions around this, and I can't remember. Did you make a comment about when you needed to have this passed, or is this, what's your timeline on this?
Sooner than later would be great. Tonight would be great.
Okay.
As the letter explains, that there was a crossover in communication. As you recall, we extended 1 year because of COVID with the health department. We wanted to make sure the committee was able to actually walk through what changes, pricing, et cetera. We were able to accomplish that. It went to a vote. An amendment to the existing contract happened in March. The contract was delivered, final version, to our office, and it was signed. So
Okay.
that's
So
explained.
we're good through 22
Correct.
with the extension.
The extension's through December 31st, 2022, correct.
Okay. So what you're asking us then in this,
This is the
however,
next,
the next step.
correct,
So, and you're asking us for, how many years is our commitment?
5.
So you're asking us for a 5-year commitment with the first 3 years is known,
Yes,
and then we have some kind of a basic idea of what the next 2 years will be. Is that correct?
The anticipation is every 3 years that you would go up 5% based on cost and expenses. However, their goal is through funding, through grants and what other opportunities they have for funding, to be self-sustaining. So if the opportunity is that they do not need the contribution that is given through the city or the other contributors, townships and villages, that could be a lesser number, but we don't know that.
So we are, but given worst case scenario, we are looking at 3 years at 5%, so an additional 15%.
5% for 3-year windows. It doesn't go up 5%.
3 1 years.
It does not go up 5% every year for 3 years. It's 5% for 3 years.
For one time.
Correct.
Okay, I misunderstood that from your letter, so thank you for that. Another question. How was the distribution arrived at? The 42,
Based on population and services provided to the population.
and you said that this number stayed the same from the last contract.
Yep.
But didn't we lose population in the census? So I would think, though, that this would have adjusted because we actually lost people. We lost 2,000, 3,000 people in the census this year.
It is based on population, but it's also the services. They look at the services that are provided to the respective populations. And they quantify that by, it's 57.5%. So that 57.5% is
Right, versus
how they break it out
42.5.
compared to the services that are, because of the population in the villages and townships compared to the services provided to the city citizens.
Okay, so you're saying that even though we lost population in the city, that the county did too?
I'm not suggesting that or saying that. I'm saying they came up with this percentage based on
So
looking at the
okay,
historical.
my question would be
hist-
then, or did we check their numbers?
Yes.
did-
We
you're
sat down,
comfortable.
we sat down with Kareem, we walked through the data, and
Okay.
yes.
Okay. All right. I was just surprised that this didn't adjust somehow since it would seem to me that people have moved out of the city and into the county, that somehow the county would start to pick up more of this. That would be my anticipation, given the census data. And Kareem saying, no, that's not the case. You get to keep paying this much.
The services that are being provided to the citizens of the city.
But I don't think, but you just said it's based on population, though. And I don't understand where we're getting into this conversation about services if it's based on population. I don't care if you touch anybody in the city, it's based on the population of people in the city. Does that make sense? And I'm not trying to be confrontational, we're just trying to understand how we're dividing this expense, which is significant.
The mayor has a comment.
Okay, sorry, Rob, thank you.
No.
So I would say overall, when we're looking at, obviously, we have a little bit different demands on the health department because of, for example, let's take our zoning regulations. We work with them if there's a raw sewage complaint. We work with them on some of these other things that aren't typically kind of higher demand items from the county overall. And so I think when we were looking at this, negotiating the contract early on with DAC through the merger, et cetera, overall, the minute amount of population change, I think the overall workload related is very proportionate. So I understand what you're saying, that there's been a minimal shift in population from within the city corporation, but I would say that in conversations with the villages, with the townships, with the Board of Health, that we all felt that the percentage of breakdown of cost was still appropriate for the services and the kind of distribution of services within the county.
And, okay, I can appreciate that, and I understand, Rob, that's what you were trying to get across to me also. But, so, Mayor, given the fact that you guys have negotiated this correctly, and so if we say no, what's going to happen at that point?
Yeah, so we would go back and discuss it. As the letter states, I kind of messed up because I thought when we did the extension, we had the legislation showing it. So sewed up, I signed it. And the auditor thankfully caught it and said, hey, did you have the legislation? I was like, oh, well, I thought I did, but obviously I didn't. So my apologies. So that's why we're coming to you. So we did negotiate. All of those other entities have signed off on it. As Rob mentioned, it has a cap on the increase, which very reasonable 5% over 3-year maximum 5% increase within the 2-year kind of extension option. The other item that he touched on but didn't really dig into that we added into this new contract is that if they don't, their cost justification that they provide, if they are under cost, then our amount proportionately also decreases, right? So one thing I'm always a big fan of is, okay, you have a cap on your max, but we also want to reap the benefits if you're managing it better, if you get outside funding, and we can see a decrease as well.
But Mayor, you said this is like a 2 or 3 with a 2-year option, but it's really not. It's a 5-year agreement.
Correct.
We're stuck for 5 years. It's just a matter of how much money we're going to pay.
Correct.
Okay, so our commitment is for 5 more years.
Correct.
All right.
Well, if we're renegotiate, and there are out clauses in it, if we suddenly decide we want to start our own health department again, please don't do that. If we decided we want to do that again, there would be legal recourse to be able to do that.
All right.
Let's give a chance. Is there any other questions, Ms. Warnicki?
Okay, I read this paragraph a few times, so I might still not have understood it. But did I read in here that we had a 5-year contract, like in the past, and it expired on December 21, that we extended for the year? But then, the way I read this, it says that in the first 3 years of the agreement that we spent this $366,000, which exceeded what we thought it was going to be for 5 years. Is that what this says?
No.
Okay.
No, I think I don't have that letter directly in front of me. I didn't pull it out of the packet. I think that's pertaining to the future costs that cannot exceed 5% over the 3 years.
Because I wondered how we were going to, I don't know, kind of contain them if they're that out of control is the way I read that, so I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask that question.
No, and again, there are the parameters within the agreement, but we meet with them regularly. We get reports from them regularly, annually. They're, Kareem typically comes in and talks about their costs. So we can certainly, if there are things that they are doing and spending costs on that are not justified, we'll discuss it. I know that they're planning to come in here soon. I know a couple people had questions on the mobile health unit. So I know they're planning to do a presentation to you all soon on that, on their measures. And I know they recently hired a PA, a physician assistant, I believe, to get that up to the full staff. So this, ideally, this would be passed tonight because of my snafu, but certainly understand that take time to review it. We'd be happy to go through. If anyone wants to sit down and review the agreement, we can certainly do that. And if you have significant concerns, I'll take one like an adult and go back and talk to the group to renegotiate it. But I would say that I'm very proud of the agreement. They have did a good job. Rob did a great job in working with the DAC and the villages to come up with what I believe is a very fair agreement.
Mr. Baumann.
Not to sort of beat this horse any longer, but obviously there's kind of a formula breakdown. How did we arrive? So in other words, were these figures kind of directed by the state, at the state level, in terms of services, population?
No, that was really when they were doing the health department merger. It was looked at on, okay, what's the total cost between the two? What services are being provided? Who's currently doing it? What is the population? Going back to that breakdown of services, what are there staff that are providing services solely to the city? So I think it was just looking at the overall operation and then trusting the judgment of their staff to say, what is the overall kind of expenditures related to that, while also then keeping in mind population.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Frishy?
So I appreciate everybody's questions. I had similar to Jeff, but my first question was going to be, did council review the contract? Did this go to a committee to get reviewed beforehand? And if it didn't, I think it's appropriate that it should. I was on council during the time, many of us were, when the health department merger took place. I know there's a lot of pieces to the pie of where their funding comes from. For instance, vaccinations, they get a lot of reimbursements because they still run things through insurances and stuff. So this number is pretty high. You mentioned sewage, as we're having more issues with that, but I would say septic tanks have become a larger job for the health department to be managing and keeping track of out in the county as well. So I would like to see it go to council so we can see the contract, understand it. Maybe it's 3 years instead of a total of 5, or maybe it's a lot more of the discussion. I just haven't seen that contract. I would like to see it, so.
So it's an administrative function. Be happy to, as I stated before, sit down and go over it with anyone, send out a copy of it. It's pretty standard language from the previous agreement. The only thing was the changes in costs, which they did have to justify. So I'd be happy to set up either a time to go over that individually with folks or send it out. And then if people want to follow up with questions at the next meeting, that would be perfectly fine with me.
I'd like to see the breakdown of all of the funding that's coming into the health department in the different pots, to see, where things have changed and why they need the increase or how it's validated. I appreciate that it's an administrative position, but council has to approve those funds at the end of the day. So if council doesn't want to have a committee on it, I would like to just, I guess, get with you and get those details. So
Well, I know we
appreciate
have
that.
2 hours scheduled on Monday, so I'm sure we can spend some time
We'll
going
we'll
through that.
take all
I'll
of
use
that.
up my time. But no, I understand that. I'll try to get some additional expenditure information that I know was reviewed by the DAC, the village mayors, and Rob during that process. And again, that's one of the reasons that we did include the function of the cost decreasing to encourage them to continue to seek outside funding to get that reimbursement and to take advantage of the grants that are currently out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Calb regarding the 2022 Street Preventive Maintenance Project Number 328-20100.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Airport Advisory Board Minutes for July 14th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed. Sorry, Ms. Mayor.
One thing I did just want to quickly note, if you read through the document in detail, it was brought to my attention that on page 7 and page 14 of the proposed rules, that the airport manager was still listed as the title. That will be changed to airport director, but just wanted you to be aware.
Report to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding the 2022 annual street resurfacing curb repairs contract A for concrete, project number 328-20500.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding 2022 annual street resurfacing curb repairs, project number 328-20500.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Traffic Commission minutes for July 18th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes to be filed.
City Planning Commission agenda for August 11th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes or agenda to be filed. Committee reports.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom is referred a request to discuss increasing the general insurance fund level via ordinance 2022-59. We recommend to leave the ordinance tabled until such time that additional information can be gathered for future further discussion.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to accept the committee report.
second Mr. Greeno, discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the Appropriations Committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted.
The Appropriations Committee, to whom is referred a request to discuss increasing the minimum reserve balance via Resolution 18, 2022. We recommend to approve moving the minimum reserve policy to 25% of the general fund expenses as stated in the resolution.
Mr. Wobser,
Make a motion to accept the report.
second Mr. Niemeyer, discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the Appropriations Committee report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. Legislation, we'll start with resolutions.
Am I correct? This is third reading for 18? Okay. Third reading for Resolution 18, 2022. A resolution adopting a minimum reserve balance policy as promulgated by the City Auditor's Office and repealing all resolutions and/or parts of resolutions in conflict herewith and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser,
First off, I'd like to thank the Appropriations Committee and the auditor and the mayor for walking us through this process. I think this is a good thing for us to do to help our financial stability and security going forward. The one thing I would mention once again on this is our minimum reserve is much different than our rainy day fund. Jim has consistently made sure I knew that, and I've learned it after a while. What would happen in case if we were to work below this number is essentially the administration just has to show us in the budget. So this comes around budget time, is how they will eventually work our way back up to maintain or restock the minimum reserve. So this doesn't really put a lot of restraints on the administration or our spending if need be, but it has to be noted, and it just really is more of an advisory type thing. So I think this is a great piece of legislation and will do well for our city.
is that in the form of a motion?
And thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion to accept.
Second Mr. Greeno. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Aye.
Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Nay.
Mr. Slough? Ms. Warnicki?
No.
And Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
2
The
nays.
resolution is adopted.
First reading for Resolution 2022, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second Mr. Palmer. Discussion. Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Frishy.
I'd just like to note that a little bit on on all three of them. They're kind of a high dollar amount of what they were for in more detail. So you had the Hartford insurance for 11,000, and then the attorneys for 35. What was the legal counsel for what case, and then what was the insurance situation? Just for notes, please.
Is that directed to anybody specifically?
I would assume the law, or assume the auditor. That's fine. Whoever would like to answer that question for me, just for my notes, I would appreciate it. For some understanding or clarification, Hartford Insurance, it was 11,321, no PO, which is fine, but I'm just curious what that was for. What was the 11,321 for? And then the Robinson Attorney Legal Counsel for 35, a little more detail on what that legal counsel was about.
Hartford's not ours.
Looking at that, on the insurance item, I believe it was related to damage with one of the previous storms, or I know we had another insurance claim recently on damage to one of our overhead doors. So it was one of those items, but I don't recall specifically. I apologize that we had that in our packet a couple weeks ago, and I don't have that with me.
For the 35,539 for legal counsel, what case or what cases is that about?
I'd have to go through the 7.5 pages, therefore, the district court cases that were in front of the Sixth Circuit, those have been completed. The cost to us was $0. That was a insurance that paid that. And then we have we've got all the, you want all the years?
No, I think,
Just-
so is that part of what you got me information late this afternoon on that spreadsheet that you just gave us? Is that what's
Right,
making up
right.
that 35, but not part of that additional 100,000 you're asking for?
Correct.
So this
So
is
it's-
already covered in your first 87,000 expenditures.
Right,
So the additional 100,000 is not part of this. That's what I was looking for.
right, so we need the additional 100,000.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We just need a vote.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Frishy? Aye. Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-61, an ordinance vacating a certain portion of an alley hereinafter referred to as the 332 and 336 Cherry Street vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2022-061.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2022-061, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
And did I already say Greeno? I think I did.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-64, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract with Klaus Construction Corporation for the design phase of the Strict Center project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hellman.
Move for approval of ordinance 2022-064.
Second, Mr. Slough. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance 2022-064, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-66, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I'd like to suspend the rules and give this ordinance its third reading tonight.
Second, Mr. Russell. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-66.
Mr. Greeno.
I'd like to move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-066.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Discussion. Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, is there a reason, I think Randy, you were the one that put this forward with its third reading. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, we're gonna have Jeremy get up and tell us that.
Yeah, so like, everything else in construction, timing, with this, we have to have this project completely done before the end of October, just because we can't allow this north apron to be open with the airport. Talking with the contractor, they were able to secure structures, which that was kind of the holdup. They were able to secure that. We actually have a pre-construction meeting tomorrow. So if this goes through tonight, we'll have that meeting tomorrow, and they'll be able to get started on that project and be able to stay on schedule.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Frishy.
Just what was the dollar amount, since I wasn't here for that last one? What's the amount we're transferring?
There's a lot of FAA money in that, so we have a 5% match. I think it was a little over a $2 million project, and between FAA and ODOT Aviation, they're covering 95% of it. And then in 2023, we're actually going to go, there it is. So the FAA amount is 1.799 million. We will be putting in 385,000 of CIT funds this year, and then next year we're going to be putting in a grant that will, the FAA will be covering 95% of that. So in 23, we'll be seeing some more money coming back from this project for it. So it's just kind of how we work out with that.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ms. Frishy.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Oh, ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-68, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-69, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-74, an ordinance amending Chapter 1100 et sec of the codified ordinances of the City of Findlay, Ohio, known as the zoning code, by rezoning the following described property referred to as 909 Broad Avenue rezone, which previously was zoned R3 small lot residential to C1 local commercial. First reading for ordinance 2022-76, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-77, an ordinance appropriating funds and declaring an emergency.
Sorry, Mr. Wilson.
And just to check again, Rob, you don't need this tonight. You're good for at least one more round?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Only on second base. We're coming home next time. All right, next.
First reading for ordinance 2022-78, an ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-107 to authorize the mayor of the City of Findlay, Ohio to continue combined health environmental services provided by the Hancock County General Health District and City of Findlay Health Department, and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-79, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract with Newcomer Concrete Services Incorporated for the 2022 annual street resurfacing curb repairs, Contract A for concrete, project number 32820500, appropriating and transferring funds thereto, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell?
With Newcomer Construction here in town and ready to start pouring curbs in the condition of Lima Avenue, and the work coordinating with AEP, and also at Jeremy's request, this needs to get done tonight, so I'd move that council statutory rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of suspension of the rules, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? And Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give this ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-79, ordinance 2022-79.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Ms. Frishy.
Just for the record, Jeremy, why were we waiving the bids for this, other than that they were local? I think you said they had done some other business, maybe.
Yeah, they were actually awarded the 22 project for concrete. So with the additional concrete work for East Lima Street, it's over the $50,000 threshold, so we have to waive that. I've actually went out to two additional concrete contractors just to kind of check their price with it, because we were working with Newcomer on their price, and they were still the lowest. And they were actually, kind of stars are aligning right now, and they were in town, and everyone's able to get the work done now. So the waiving of it is because I'm over the 50,000 threshold.
I knew that, yeah.
Yeah.
But they've been doing work, and you got some informal comparisons that you have on record.
Yes.
That,
Yep.
awesome, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance, say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Ms. Frishy?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
And Mr. Russell?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-80, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Any old business? Mr. Wobser.
I would just a reminder to the Strategic Planning Committee. We mentioned this in our meeting just an hour ago, but we do have another meeting on August 16th at 10 o'clock in the morning. It'll be a long one. I would invite other council members, if you would like to attend, please come. It'll be at 10 o'clock in the third floor conference room, when we're going to start digging into the first draft of the strategic plan that has been given to us by Planning Next.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wobser, what day did you say that was?
For you, Mr. Slough, that's next year in 2024.
I love you, man.
No, sir. I'm sorry. That would be August 16th, Tuesday, the day of our next meeting, and it'll be at 10 o'clock and probably last, I would expect, at least 2 to 3 hours.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other old business? New business? Ms. Mayor.
Also, if you plan to attend the strategic planning meeting, please let me know so we can plan food accordingly. Just a couple of quick notes. I don't want you to show up and then get hangry. So, with the minimum reserve, again, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time and having the Appropriations Committee meeting, so we were able to discuss that in more detail. With the request for the concession stands, the Cube is going strong. Lots of great events out there. If you haven't been able to stop out and enjoy one of the many age group sports that we're having out there, please do so. I apologize for being slightly late. As you can tell, I was a little little more casual. I was at the National Night Out program at Riverside Park, which was awesome. I think we had record attendance out there, which caused a little bit of a traffic havoc for me trying to get back over here. But it was a lot of fun, and I know the FOP and a number of our other law enforcement and safety service first responders put a lot of work in to make that happen. So a great event by all. In that same vein, I won't go into details, but I just want to continue to thank our first responders. They deal on a daily basis with things that we can only imagine. And today, as I was reading a report of an event where a young child had had a drowning incident this weekend, and they were able to save the child's life, we take it for granted how what they encounter on a daily basis and how we're able to go about our lives because of their work. So I just want to give them a shout out for that. All of our team, fire department, police, that we're all working on seeing together to be able to do that, and then Hanco and all those safety services. I will follow up with any issues on the Hancock Public Health Agreement. I'll send that out to you all. If anybody has questions or wants to meet one-on-one, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Mr. Wobser.
I had two quick things for new business. First off, I wanted to give a quick shout out to one of our own Findlay High School graduates who graduated some time ago, but Christine Stansberry has been involved with an event that's been going on for quite some time that you're probably not aware of, because quite honestly, I wasn't aware of it until a couple years ago when she told me about it. It's called GISH, G-I-S-H, and it stands for the Greatest International Scavenger Hunt. And she's been involved in this for some time, and not to go into depth, but it's kind of a unique situation that happens around the world. And they raise money to, this year, they're benefiting Ukraine charities, and also do a lot of things in their scavenger hunt that benefit the environment. So I thought that was a unique thing, and we have one of our own Findlay High School graduates participating in that. Last thing, for council to consider, Holly brought up a good point and something that I had thought about previously. I was wondering if anybody else would be opposed to or appreciate if we had the amount of the resolution or ordinances put into the agenda recap that Denise does for us. I know for me, it would be appreciative if that dollar value was in there, just so that we know, again, sometimes when we go a month and a half later, it's nice to have that quick amount of information there. So if anybody else would be appreciative of that, I'd let us know. Maybe we could take a quick vote and add that in. Is anybody saying no?
I only heard one person say yes.
The only issue would be if there's several appropriations.
I'll say yes,
Okay.
if you need a second there.
Okay. It's just a quick add-on to the agenda piece. So, thank you.
Any other additional new business? I have one piece. Go ahead, Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, I've got a question for, I don't know, Rob or Jeremy or the mayor on the Strict Center. And I understand that's coming along nicely and you're ready to award the bids. Has anybody on council been review those drawings or the placement of that building? And the reason that I ask it, probably before your time, I got a little bit concerned about it when they thought that'd be a great site for a salt barn, which really kind of raised the hair on the back of my neck, because I thought it's a nice looking fire station to begin with. And to put a salt barn next to that thing or somewhere close by didn't seem to be an appropriate location for it, being with the nice residential area across the way and in the general area, as well as it's a nice looking building. Are you two and the mayor pleased with the way this thing looks and the way it's going to be on the site?
So no salt barn out there. Let's put that to bed.
That's a good thing. That's the first.
The aesthetics of the development of, the plans are not done. I mean, we haven't even started those. All right, it's all been conceptual, it's been concept, conversations and so forth. So getting ready to move down that pathway. Chief Eberly, though, way back worked with RCM, and we actually have some designs that are building off of when we actually award this to Klaus to move forward. But it will fit the layout, the format, aesthetically appealing to what's already out there. It's going to be very attractive, and it's going to be welcoming, that it'll be a regional education site that we can be very proud of. So I'm confident with what it's going to look like, that we can be proud of it. It's not going to be an eyesore or anything close to a salt barn. Nothing against salt barns, but that's not the right
We need
place.
salt barns, we just don't
Not
need them.
there.
Not there.
Not
You're
there.
absolutely right.
So,
All right.
and Chief Eberly has been very open in sharing of conceptual designs, and he absolutely, as we develop this and move along, he's open to share that. We want to be open and make sure everyone's on the same page as we move through this.
Just out of curiosity, I may stop up and look at them sometime, but
Anytime.
thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Any other new business? Just a reminder to the city representatives of the community that this Friday, August 5th, is the Findlay City Schools Community Day. It's an event that's invited, the community is invited for free. It starts at 11 o'clock and ends at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, they'll have the Findlay High School varsity football team will scrimmage. But during the day, the band will perform. The fall sports teams will be introduced. There'll be a number of vendors and events there. It's something that I think all of you should attend to represent us as city council and the city administration. I know they've worked very hard. I have inside information on that, and they're hoping for a large turnout. So remember, this Friday starts at 11 to 4:30 is the vendors and events, and then at 4:30 the band will play, and that's when some of the sports stuff, the fall sports teams will be announced, and then the scrimmage that night. Not really sure who they're scrimmaging. I don't know if anybody else knows. Who is it? Yeah. And so there'll be apparel, food trucks, bouncy house, first responders will be there, a lot of vendors, some yard games, and a lot more. So I encourage you all to attend. If there's no other new business, I will go ahead.
Is that at the stadium?
Donnell Stadium. Hearing nothing else, new business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Slout, second. Mr. Baumann, all those in favor of adjournment say aye. Those opposed, nay.